The December 14th edition of Hot Topics. This is the last Hot Topics that I'll be conducting. The new supervisor will probably have something, but she may not call it Hot Topics. So, and I'm really pleased that as my special guest this evening, we have Lew Bauman, who was the county administrative officer for all of the years that I was supervisor. So we thought we'd just do a little reminiscing, walk down memory lane, and then maybe he can tell me a little bit about what retirement is like, since he did that about a year or slightly more than a year ago, I think. So first, I just want to say welcome to everyone who's participating via Zoom and on Facebook Live. So welcome, welcome. And as usual, if you have questions for either Dr. Bauman or myself on the topics that we're discussing or any other that are on your mind, please feel free to ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will get to them in due course. So Dr. Bauman, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to join, and we're so pleased for your retirement coming up, and we know that will be well-deserved and most enjoyable.
Thank you. Well, you're my precursor on the most enjoyable. So if you say so, I'm disposed to believe you. So, since you've been scouting the retirement land.
Yes. And we certainly didn't expect the COVID crisis to come up in your last year of dedicated service, but we're grateful for your stewardship and oversight and tremendous work that you and your colleagues on the board have done, as well as our county staff team.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I guess, the universe's way to keep me engaged in my last year, in case I got a little too much of short-timers attitude and had a foot out the door. There was no way to do that with all of what was going on. Just when we thought we knew what kind of information to put out for people on COVID, then circumstances would change and we had to figure it all out all over again. So it's been quite a year.
Yes, it has. And as you noted, we've had so many disasters over the years that, you talked about making the emergency services an actual department.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's just such a huge issue for us now with climate change and sea level rise and our fires and our water shortages, and now with pandemics, certainly no shortage of challenges.
Thank you for reminding me about emergency services as a department. We are in the midst of, we spent all day today prepping the performance reviews for delivery tomorrow. And I thought, I could ask our current CAO what the progress is on that move. So
excellent.
Yeah.
I wonder if perhaps you could highlight for our audience this evening the performance review process and the benefits of it for an administrative team.
I could, and then you can tell your side of the story.
Certainly.
So one of the things, when I look back and I see there are many accomplishments that I can take some degree of credit for, and one of them is the institution of annual performance reviews for the 5, as they were then, now 6 executives who report directly to the Board of Supervisors. Dr. Bauman was one of our first victims, and he also was the person to whom it fell to kind of institutionalize the process and make sure that we didn't forget, because that's one of the challenges that I think previous boards had, was they thought, yeah, we should do that, and then there's plenty of other business that comes up, and so it's easy to lose track of. So Dr. Bauman was able to set up a process to ensure that it happened each year. So what we do is we ask the to give us a summary of what they've been working on this past year or 6 months. We actually do an update at 6 months. But in the annual, we ask them to look at the goals that we worked out the previous year, the board with them, and what progress they've been able to make on those goals. They send those to us, and then as a parallel process, the board fills out one of those, give me a number between 1 and 5 about how well the executive is doing on any number of in a few different areas like management, professionalism, knowledge of the field, that sort of thing. So we do one of those numerical things, and then we also do a listing of some of the strengths that the executive has, if there are any areas that might need further development, and if there are any resources or assistance that we would want to suggest about how to meet those needs. And then we look at goals for the upcoming year. And we usually, the individual board members, we do all this separately. Then we have a consultant, Dr. Garcia, who compiles all the information. And we usually have a pretty long list of the goals for the county administrative officer, county council, the equal opportunity officer, now known as the civil rights officer, the head of the Water Resources Agency, the head of Natividad Medical Center, and the public defender. So we usually, all of us come up with goals we might want to suggest, and then today was the day that we took all that information that's been compiled and we go through it as a board without the executive present to say, okay, because sometimes I might have a perspective on something that the rest of the board doesn't agree with. And so then we sort of talk about, okay, how are we going to present this? Because the evaluation really needs to be from the entire board. So we spend time kind of arm wrestling all of that, really trying to narrow the goals down and make them as specific as we can with some timelines on them. And then tomorrow we do the next stage of the process, which is when we sit down with the individual executives and we go over the review, and we actually ask them to comment on and discuss with us what the goals are that we've come up with, and if they want to add some, argue with us about whether some of those should be on there, or and we try to have it be as collaborative a process as we can. And then, as I say, there's a 6-month check-in where we just get an update on how it's all going with the goals, and then the annual review the next year. And the advantage that I saw, well, in theory and in practice, we know that when we do regular performance evaluations, it's an opportunity for the board and for the executive to make sure we're kind of more on the same page. And if there are some challenges that we don't think that the executive is handling particularly well, we have those check-in points. We can ask for quarterly or monthly updates if there's a particularly challenging area, or we can give direction. It gives a regular communication pattern for us to be able to check in on the goals and any issues, which means that the advantage for the executive is that we don't sit around and just get more and more frustrated and then yell at them in a public session, or dress them down in front of the rest of the board in some other conversation, or just come unglued in any other kind of setting. And it really allows for there to be a much more coherent conversation, and have fewer shocks and surprises for either the board about the performance of the executive, or for the executive about what the board is thinking. So that's kind of in general what I found. What was your experience of that process?
Well, I think you described the process quite well. And I think for our audience this evening, I can't see how many attendees we have tonight. Do we have, how big of a?
We have just a few on Zoom, but often we have quite a number on Facebook Live, which we can't see.
Aha.
Um, Wendy may have a clue and she can put it in the chat and we'll be able to see. But.
Okay, well, I know most folks are familiar with county government, but if I can just step back for a moment and put the performance evaluations in context. County government is very disaggregated in its structure. Of course, we have 5 elected supervisors, but you have 27 department heads overseeing an organization of some 5,500 people with a budget now of about $1.6 billion. So that's a lot of public resources, a lot of activity, and that's quite a handful for our elected supervisors to oversee.
So we put the CAO in charge and we make you do it.
Well, in part, but of course you have 5 elected officials. You have the sheriff, the DA, the assessor, the tax collector, the auditor controller. And those positions have certain authorities under law that are distinct from the board. The board, of course, has control over their human resources and budget. And then, as you indicated, you have all these other department heads, many of them appointed directly by the board, like the chief executive of Natividad or the Water Resources Agency general manager, your county council, your CAO. So the county administrative officers really in a role in most California counties of coordinating and collaborating with these individuals and ensuring that their activities are in alignment with the Board of Supervisors. And the performance evaluation process that Supervisor Parker spearheaded really provides an opportunity for the board to refine and clarify the policy direction that they're giving the organization. And to me, the great advantage of that is you don't have a situation where an appointed individual like a county administrator is running the place. Because as a population, we don't want unelected people making policy decisions and implementing actions and policies and programs that really aren't under the clear direction of our elected officials. And the performance evaluations provide a very precise instrument of which the Board of Supervisors can give clear direction, not only to the county administrator, but the other appointed officials about how they see the policy that they have adopted as elected officials of the organization and how that is deployed vis-a-vis their appointed officials. So it's an excellent process. Not all counties do it. I think Monterey County does a great job of it, and I'm glad to see it's alive and well.
Thank you, Lou. Yeah, it's as you say, there are so many moving parts, and having the opportunity to at least know what some of us are thinking really helps, would help you manage and supervise the folks that are under you. And then if we need to communicate with some of the independent elected department heads and kind of let them know what we're thinking, we can do that. So yeah, it's a very, very wholesome process. And I think a few years back, one of the board members was asking Dr. Garcia, well, what do other counties do or other jurisdictions when this kind of issue on performance evaluations come up? And he says, I don't think there are that many who actually do this. So it's sadly rarer than I think it really should be, but we're doing it. So that's very good news.
That's good news for all of your constituents, including myself, who's now a constituent.
That's right. That's right.
Rein those department heads in, please.
That's right. Yeah, it's a challenge. The old cat herding thing. Yeah. So are you going to interview me? Do you have other questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, excellent.
So as you reflect on 12 years of public service, there's been a whole lot of things going on in all those 12 years. What do you consider your most important issues and achievements over your well over a decade of service?
Mhm. Well, I guess first I would say that it's a real achievement to kind of show up for the work every day for 12 years and keep my composure, which I've been able to do in public. Christy Markey, my chief of staff, did tell the attendees at my retirement party that I have been known to swear in certain situations. No, we kept it under wraps. It was, well within the sanctity of our office, with no one else around as far as we knew. But I think, really trying to understand the issues as best I can, make decisions based on my values and principles and, what I think is going to be best for the, the residents and the environment of the county. And to do that with thoroughness and enthusiasm for 12 years is I'm proud of that, and the fact that I have been able to maintain kind of a steadiness about who I am and the work that I do. There's a persistence there, and there's also just kind of a low key. We look for the opportunities, we follow them. I don't get too wired up, and I don't get too down in the dumps. Try to just keep it pretty steady. And that's an achievement in and of itself in the highly political atmosphere that it is. I have colleagues who support my opponent every time, regardless of who it is. And, we fight like the Dickens to promote what we think is best for the county. And so we are political adversaries to a certain extent on that board. But I'm pleased that when one of my political adversaries says something or takes a position that makes sense to me, I'm willing to say so and go along. So I think that kind of, it's a kind of civility. I really didn't take a lot of the political stuff personally. Just I know that that's the world we're in, and so I do see that people, when people do take things personally, it just drains so much energy and it distracts the conversation, and it just makes everything harder than it already is. But then I'd say second, or another thing that I'm proud of, is the way that we were able to include the community voice in decision making. And I found over and over and over again that when there were community members, sometimes called activists, sometimes called community members or community groups, who cared about an issue, and we could include them in the conversation, we were able to get really interesting and important things done. So some examples there were, our sustainability program. A lot of those ideas were, it's an idea whose time has come, but a lot of the monitoring and suggestions and inspiration for the work that the sustainability manager was doing, and now the new one is doing, are really come out of the community groups that are focusing on these kinds of issues. The healthcare issues, Via Care and Esperanza Care, expanding the definition of Medi-Cal. We had such resistance. There was an opportunity in some states that counties could expand that Medi-Cal definition in advance of Obamacare. It was coming with Obamacare, but in California, we had the opportunity to do that early so that people could get started, and then they would just automatically roll into Obamacare. And it was, just seemed to make sense. So I was in meetings where we were suggesting that should happen. A lot of nothing happened. Members of the public caught on about it. They started coming to meetings and suggesting we do it. Still nothing. So, and the head of the health department at that time and Natividad Medical Center were dead set against the idea. They were very worried that it was risky, it was going to be costly, it was, pain in their neck. They were busy with other things. But by my insistence on the dais and the community members meeting with the health department and with Natividad, we were able to make that happen. It took a lot longer than it should have, but it did happen, and it never would have without the community really helping and moving things along. And then once it had been in place for not very long, a couple of months, then the head of the health department and the head of Natividad, who, by the way, are not the current incumbents. So you don't have to, give Elsa Jimenez or Gary Gray the evil eye the next time you see them. This was their predecessors. But they were singing the praises of the program within such a short time after it was put in place. And so, early childhood development is another example. And of course, Esperanza Care, which is healthcare coverage for people who are left out of the Affordable Care Act. What else did we do with the public? Well, we stopped some bad land use, thanks to the public. And one of my personal favorites, in addition to Monterey Downs, which was just the wrong project in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was the wrong size. I mean, my goodness. That finally, because of the public actually changing the membership on the Seaside City Council, the signal was strongly sent to the developer that they might want to move along down the road. But one that got a lot closer to fruition was the commercial or the industrial park idea that was going to happen in the middle of an oak woodlands on Fort Ord, on land that was within the county's jurisdiction. And that was one, when I first was elected, it was being discussed, and I didn't really think that much about it, but the more I thought, what are we doing? We were proposing to have MST put a bus maintenance facility out there. They had a previous location, and the county staff enticed them to think about moving it over to this other place. And I didn't like to be against MST, but it was, again, the wrong project in the wrong place at the wrong time. When it came to the Board of Supervisors, it moved on through the process, came to the Board of Supervisors. It was approved on a 4-1 vote. I voted against it. Well, the community was so appalled that we were going to cut down tens of thousands of oak trees to put in a bus yard, that they went out and they got signatures, a lot of signatures in a very short period of time, and brought it back to the Board of Supervisors, where we had a choice. We could either undo the approval, or we could put it on the ballot and have the voters decide. Well, it was pretty clear to my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors that the voters, in a sense, had spoken, by how quickly the activists had been able to get those signatures. So the thing that made it extra sweet was that there was the decision to change the approval and unapprove the Whispering Oaks project. And I appreciated that the supervisors had come around to my way of thinking, with a little help from our friends. And this happened on Valentine's Day. That was one of the best Valentines I ever received. So the community is just so valuable, so much common sense. And often the elected officials, because we're busy dealing with so many things, we lose touch with kind of the common sense perspective that the public has. So sometimes they have to kind of rattle our cage a little bit. And it's one of the reasons that I've really appreciated doing Hot Topics and trying to stay in touch with what the community is thinking, so that I can bring that perspective, and encourage, the members of the public to show up as well. I think another thing where we had a lot of participation from nonprofits and the community was with the formation of the Community Alliance for Safety and Peace. It was the idea was that violence is a public health issue, and that there are ways that we can work together on the prevention and the early intervention, instead of waiting for there to be a lot of violence in the community. And Community Alliance for Safety and Peace is going to this day. So really, really powerful when we get the community involved in the solution. And one of the really exciting things that's happening right now to do with the pandemic is we see that communities of color are disproportionately impacted with transmission of the disease, severe illness, and death. And we are developing a plan to actually pinpoint those neighborhoods, those communities that are hardest hit, and really figure out, we have strategies that are working for some people, but not for others. So how do we really make sure that all the resources, all the things we know how to do, really get to the people who need it the most? And that's the community pushing, again, the county. We can do more, we can do it better. And it's thanks to COPA that we are really, and actually the hospitality and ag communities are also very focused on this. So we have really a lot of alignment, and good creative thinking, resources coming to the fore. So those are a few examples.
Yes, and community power. You missed a big one.
Oh, that's right. Well done. It's so obvious. Yeah, that's right. Community power. Also, the breastfeeding policy initiative. I mean, they're just early childhood development. There's so many that were this combination of things that were issues that were being raised in the community and roundabout, and we really managed to pull everybody together to make something really key happen. And yeah, Monterey Bay Community Power was a really, really great one. And interestingly, that it was, as it was moving forward, there was agreement that it seemed like a good idea to have more renewable sources of electrical energy. But there was a little power skirmish just as we were at the point where the Monterey County Board of Supervisors and different cities within the county were going to decide to join Monterey Bay Community Power. And the city of Salinas was trying to get the county to form our own community power organization, so that we could be bigger fish, or have more impact, more, and I think that would really have derailed the process to have a couple of key entities like the city of Salinas and the county go a different way on a parallel track. Plus, it would have been very expensive and a lot of work. It's a pretty specialized area of business. So thankfully, we were able to get a majority to keep the county on track to join the larger organization. So, and the city of Salinas ended up coming along as well, which is great. So it's all a success story. And then we've expanded now beyond the three original counties, Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz counties, to include San Luis Obispo County, parts of Santa Barbara County. It's catching on. It's really exciting.
It's a great achievement.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I was looking back, and when you joined the board, your first budget was 2009, 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right when we had the subprime mortgage crisis. It was right at the beginning of the Great Recession. We had a budget of about $965 million. Today, I believe your budget's about 1.6 billion. So it's a good 60% increase. And you played a big part of that over the years. So what you know, and this may be interesting for Wendy to hear, what do you consider to be good fiscal policies and financial policies in context of supervisors' role in administering county budgets?
That's a nice big question. So one of over the years, the budget office has really done a lot of work on developing the financial guidelines and really setting out policy, as well as making sure that, and this was at our insistence, I think, that the Board of Supervisors be involved in the budget process earlier than just receiving all of the work that the departments had done, very good work, and then, you know, tweaking here and there. We really get a chance to look at sort of the shape of things to come and give more general direction at that point. And the budget office then works with the departments to come up with the specifics of the budget. And I think the board, I've been very impressed with the board the last few years in being, I mean, we have a fairly activist board in terms of where we all like to see money spent. And we have our kind of favorite things. And one of mine is always prevention. Can we invest in the early end of things so that then the more expensive problems, some of them can be averted or at least made not quite as serious. And other people have investments in education that they like to make. And so at any given time, our supervisors could come up with probably a good $10 million of our own little projects that we like. And I've been very impressed with our restraint. There's a lot of awareness that, you know, just because when the times are good, it looks like we have money, we have to be very careful not to put that into ongoing expenses unless we know we have an ongoing source of money. So I'd say that's, you know, kind of a principle that we wrestle with all the time. And whenever it's, you know, the final budget, we're looking at our contingencies and is there money in the cannabis assignment? And, you know, those are one-time monies. So sometimes we do allocate them to ongoing expenses. And then we say to the departments, good luck when you come back next year, you know, have that fit into your overall budget. Otherwise, it may not continue. So there was something else I was going to say in there. But I think really trying to take that longer view and not spend money today that we won't have tomorrow. Just really trying to make sure where the fiscal health is, where is the revenue coming from? Is it going to continue to come in? We get projections that are very helpful about where the property, you know, whether the property tax is going to continue upward as it might have been for a couple of years, or is it going to plateau, or is it going to fall? What about sales tax? What about now we have a new source of revenue, the cannabis revenue? How is that doing? What are the conditions that are going to potentially affect how much of that is going to come in? Really watching all of that very, very carefully. And I think the board has been, this board has been much more prudent in my estimation than you know, previous iterations of the board had been. There was a tendency to, if certain departments asked for something, just kind of automatically give it to them, whether we had the money or not. And that would especially happen in election years. You know, there's been much less of that going on, a lot steadier hand on the budget. And of course, we're so fortunate to have a really strong and knowledgeable budget team within the county who really manages to wring every last penny out of the departments, making sure that they're spending their money prudently and that they're not asking for money that they don't need to ask for. So it's really quite a team effort, and the departments year after year, like when there's a tough budget year, and it is particularly when something happens in the middle of the budget year, the departments have been so good about really curtailing their expenditures to try to come in ahead of budget, so that if there is a decrease in revenue projected that's unexpected, that we don't run into deficit spending. We have to have a structurally balanced budget by law, and one of the big exceptions was the year that we had a lot of damage from storms and after fires, and we ended up having to dip into our reserves in order to cash flow a lot of those repairs, and that was not something we had ever done before, and thankfully we had the reserves to do that, and we've built the reserves back up now so that if something else happens, we can go back to that one-time source.
Well, thank you for that overview. It can't be overemphasized how important fiscal prudence is. I talked to some of my colleagues in the consulting business. They're telling me there's cities in the LA basin that are looking at running out of money next month. And, to ensure that your local government is fiscally stable, to be able to weather fire, floods, pandemics, is really a statement on leadership. And I think it's really one of the more important aspects of supervisorial leadership is good budget stewardship. And I thank you for your many years of that.
Thank you. And I think it sends a signal. I mean, I think the supervisors respond with a lot of respect towards the department heads when the department heads and their staffs are managing well. We want to honor that, and we want to do our part and not be, flinging money every which way. And I think vice versa. If we're cautious and prudent with our financial allocations, I think that helps the departments also kind of, it's that gets back to that sort of being in alignment question.
Absolutely. So, of course, a big part of your role was acting as a board of supervisors of the Water Resources Agency. So a lot has gone on over those years. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Gracious sakes. Where does one begin? A lot, I guess the big shift that's happened in the last few years that people are probably aware of is that there's a state law that passed that required that basins that are out of balance need to develop a plan to get back into balance and to have a sustainable balance of demand and recharging of the water supply. And in Monterey County, it's relatively rare in the West, I think, to have all of our water sources are within Monterey County. We don't get outside water from the San Luis Reservoir or from the mountains, or we have the Carmel River, we have the Salinas River, and the groundwater basins, and that's we're independent in that sense, but also then we have no one to blame but ourselves when we are in overdraft, and that's the position we're in all of our water supply areas. So with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency being set up in the Salinas Valley, it's they are tasked with coming up with a plan that will get the basin into balance by 2040, I think it is. So that's and that may entail some kind of drastic measures that weren't really possible before. Um, it's kind of the Wild West in the water world. I mean, if you have land, you can drill down, and however much water you can pump up from down there is, is yours to use. And with this, with the seawater intrusion that we have and the overdraft in the basin, and this groundwater sustainability plan, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency has the authority to, tell people what they can and can't do. And that's a new experience for some of the for all of the landowners in the Salinas Valley. So one of the things that happen is that the actual agency board is made up of a lot of these folks. So they do have a voice at the decision-making table, which is critical. I mean, other people cannot lay on anybody what they should do, particularly if there's a deprivation involved. And so they are being as thoughtful as they can be about the strategies that will do the most to replenish the basin with the least amount of economic hardship and lack of vegetables for our tables. So it's that, I think, is the biggest deal. And seawater intrusion has been happening. Well, it's been being measured since the 1940s, I think. And so it's not a new problem. It just gets worse every year that we pump more out of the ground than goes back in through rain and the flow of the river. So very interesting. And there's talk. The Water Resources Agency was kind of in charge of as much of the management as they could do, as well as flood control. And in the county. And now there's talk that the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is kind of maybe taking over some of the functions that the Water Resources Agency used to do. So how do we, what's the governance structure that best takes care of the responsibilities? And anyway, it's an interesting one. At one point, people were thinking, oh, well, the GSA, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, can just take over the Water Resources Agency, and the Resources Agency can just go away because it's not needed anymore. But they were not taking into account the flood responsibilities. So that's something that nobody wants, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see how those duties get divvied out. And of course, when it's water, it's something that we tend to fight over and disagree about. So that's true in the Groundwater Sustainability Agency world as well. One of the concerns that the city of Marina has, Marina actually sits over the Salinas Valley water basin and extracts water from that basin for Marina residents. And Marina was very concerned that if it was simply a seat at the larger table, that the needs and concerns of the residents of Marina would be completely ignored and subsumed in the larger agency. And so they really held out to be their own groundwater sustainability agency. The plans have to mesh, but that has created a good deal of friction and unfriendly comments. And then of course in Marina as well is where the CalAm company wants to put its desal plant and its slant wells, which they say won't damage the aquifer, but if you look at where the slant wells actually go and where they're going to be pulling their water, it looks as though it is getting pulled right out of the aquifer. And so there's a lot of concern again in Marina that having that project pulling water out of the Salinas Basin and sending it to the peninsula is perhaps not a legal move in terms of water rights, but also even if it were, would be very detrimental to Marina's water supply, which is already at risk with all the seawater intrusion. They've had to go deeper and deeper to find, potable water. So lots of challenges in the water world, and District 4 has kind of been in the epicenter of some of the most vociferous disagreement.
To add to the challenges of your position to be the District 4 supervisor.
Yes, yes. I don't know. I think Wendy was aware of that when she when she ran. So she came in with her eyes open. We've talked about these issues in the office a long time. So.
So were we going to take questions from folks?
Oh yes, let me see. Oh yes, let's see if there are.
Before we do that, Jane, Ali wanted to share a couple photos from Hot Topics in years past. If you'll indulge me, since this is our last Hot Topics and it's ending in a very different way than how it started. I'm going to do some screen shares and hopefully this works. So this was a Hot Topics in Seaside, like way, many years ago.
There's one in Salinas that has Dr. Bauman in it at the Cherry Bean.
Sure is.
I think. Yeah, it was one of the very first ones. Oh, there's
We've got one at the duck pond or the frog pond in Delray Oaks, where we took a tour with a ton of people. Super fun. We've got, let's see if it just.
A lot of different locations for our Hot Topics.
We met at the Seaside Library for a period of time and had to, but then we were too loud, and I think they asked us to find somewhere where we weren't quite so noisy. But that was fun. And okay, this is not super smooth, but we spent a lot of time at pizza places. So that was lots of fun.
So that is, was that me and Ed's?
It was me and Ed's, yep.
In Seaside.
We hung out at the Cherry Bean in Salinas and had to speak up over the sound of the grinding coffee beans. So that was always fun. And that was with our former Natividad CEO. That was fun. And I think the picture you're thinking of was also taken at the Cherry Bean.
There we go.
Oh my goodness.
Do you remember that?
I do. That's probably 12 years ago.
Yep, I believe that was probably 2009. And we spent a lot of time with the public reviewing the agenda for the following meeting, the board meeting on the following day.
And you notice that the agendas are all on paper there?
Yep.
They're no longer on iPads. They weren't on iPads in those days.
That's right.
Well, in Lou, when back in the olden days, we would get that binder delivered, and we had a volunteer, Bob Coble, came into the office every Monday or Thursday, and he would hole punch it and put it in the binder for us. And if the public wanted to know what was the staff report for an agenda item, they needed to either go to the clerk's office or the library or come into our office to view the item. And,
until April of 2009, because my first meeting, I asked the clerk to figure out when she could put those online so people could get them more easily. And I think she said April. So.
Yeah, pretty incredible how far we've come. We now have a new website and we're pushing a ton of information back out to the public.
It's all good.
How do I, there we go. Yeah, so I'll send you a copy of that, Lou, that photo that we used, I think, to highlight and advertise Hot Topics meetings for many years. And Jane, you did Hot Topics on a weekly basis. So we had a Hot Top for years. I think your whole first term, we met with the public in person in different locations in Seaside and Marina and Salinas every Monday before a board meeting and reviewed every item that the board was going to discuss the following day. And sometimes, as you saw from the pictures, there would be, 20 people that showed up. And other times there would be nobody, and we'd get to have like a very personal conversation with folks.
And I would always ask people to say their name, just their first name was fine, where they lived, and if there was a particular topic that they came to discuss. Sometimes the topics were on the agenda, but a lot of times they weren't. So we would go over the agenda and then talk about the issues, and then go through the issues that they had come to talk about. That was pretty cool. I remember one time nobody wanted to talk about anything that was on the agenda. They only wanted to talk about violence and gangs, and so we just spent the whole time on all of that. And anyway, it was really, that was a good one.
It's an excellent way to engage the public.
And I was thinking today, Jane, you know, there's so many things as we're going through the office files and sort of reviewing what's there. That first term, I think it was every quarter, you held a community meeting where we dove deep on a specific topic, provided some information, and then had people break out into small groups.
Remember the one on the budget? I remember that I was, because it was a tough, as you mentioned, Lou, it was a tough budget year because of the housing crash and the ripple effect financially that had on us. I was just sure that people were going to come in and say, well, whatever you do, don't cut my favorite program, whatever, you know, make sure we have services in, you know, my area. And that was not it at all. We didn't have one person who went that direction. Their basic message was just spend our money wisely. I was really impressed with the kind of the confidence and the trust that the public was putting in us. And it's one of the reasons I've taken it so seriously to be very, very cautious with our money, and also to make sure that we're really spending it in the ways that the public has asked us to. It's one of the challenges with the cannabis money. We actually went out to the community and asked them what their priorities were for this new funding stream, or to protect services. If we weren't adding money, sometimes we just try not to cut, because if it's a bad budget year, and they told us their priorities. And so trying to stay true to what the community feels is important. And that it had a lot to do with early childhood development, education, healthcare, you know, the basics that we all need, and that some people struggle to have access to. So.
Outstanding. I see Francine Rod has joined us. Francine, nice. So nice to see you.
Wow, so nice to see you, Lou. Miss you on the dais, and congratulations again, Jane, on your retirement. I'm just kind of wondering what you're going to miss the most about not being a county supervisor as you ride off into the sunset, but don't stay too far away for too long, because we need your allyship to continue to make change.
Thank you. Well, you know, one of the things I have loved about being a county supervisor is how much I've learned about things I never knew that county supervisors needed to know anything about. And to really be, I feel like I'm on the cutting edge of knowing things. Like with COVID, we have briefings at least twice a week. So we are very current on what seems to be going on. And I know that even if I pay very close attention in civilian life, I will not be as well informed about things as important as the pandemic, but also what's going on in the garbage world. Where are we with organics diversion anyway? I mean, I think that's very interesting, and it's going to be harder for me to get that information. And I think too, to feel like that I'm actively being able to make a positive difference in people's lives. That's been so rewarding in this work, that just by doing what I do every day, there's so much that if we do it well, as I always say, if we do it well, we are making life better for people, improving the quality of life in Monterey County. And if we don't do it well, we're just another pain in the neck for people as they try to live their lives. And I tried to have us do as much as we could on the positive side as possible.
Well, we certainly appreciated everything you did, especially for early childhood development. So on behalf of First Five and all of the work you did, we really appreciate it. And I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us a little bit about, as you're entering into the other side, what is it that you would recommend for those of us who are on the other side? Now that you have been on one side, you're going into the other side. How do we help government remain accountable and supportive moving forward?
Well, I have found that by really making sure that the community is engaged and informed, the community really helps the board. I've had board members say, well, that's not a priority in the budget. We didn't have anybody here talking about that. I'm like, well, since when do you have to have the babies show up to talk about how important early childhood development is? You know, it's not like it goes away if the public isn't speaking up about it, but it definitely keeps it in the mind of staff and the supervisors in those decision-making moments when, you know, when the public is there. And speaking of going to the other side, Lou, I want to ask you, tell me, how do I adjust psychologically from going to work every day and having just endless work? I could have worked 24/7 to now being able to do anything I want or nothing. How do I keep my sanity and my sense of self?
It's a great question, and there's a transition period, because you wake up the day after and you're expecting to read, you know, 500 emails and 10 texts, and there's nobody there. And I think it's even a little bit more challenging now that we have COVID, and, you know, with the interaction, you know, in your role as supervisor, you're interacting with people all day long, and all of a sudden you're all by yourself. So it takes a little bit of adjustment, but I know you love the outdoors and you have a wonderful family, and once you engage in that and start getting involved in nonprofits, and when you go from being on the dais and making a multi-million-dollar decision to maybe packing bags for homeless individuals or at BTC or something like that, and it's equally as fulfilling. And it's nice to be outside. It's really nice to be outside. You'll like it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I imagine there's going to be an adjustment, but I do know that there's so many elements to life that I enjoy that I've given short shrift over the last 12 years and probably more, that it'll be.
You've earned this. Enjoy it.
Thank you. Well, I'll see you out there on the trails. And I think Wendy Wendy, did you say you have a video you want to show?
We do. I just received the Jane Parker's Reflections on Retirement video from our county tech team. So no one has seen it yet, but if you like, we can close with this, and then we'll turn off our recording. And Francine's actually going to help me live stream it so that we've got tech support here. So stay tuned, and then we'll turn it off. But any following words for Lou or for Jane? Their final hot topics, Jane.
Thanks, everybody. It's been fantastic. I just have loved being part of, of your lives, and hopefully making life better in Monterey County. And so many partners in the community, the county staff, my staff. It's just been a joy. So I'll look forward to seeing you in perhaps a more relaxed way in the coming weeks and months. Take care. Remember, be safe and be kind.
As I'm wending my way to the end of my third term, I have so enjoyed this work for the past 12 years. When I thought about running for office and decided to run for office in 2004, I really thought that the fact that I had grown up in this area, that I had been a small business owner, that I had worked in nonprofit management would all be ingredients that could help the county function better. So I thought my voice would be helpful. I also really wanted to see much more involvement by members of the community in the decision-making and the problem-solving on their behalf. So that was one of the reasons that I really focused on transparency in the beginning, because I know that people in the community, they know their community, they know their problems and issues, and they have ideas about how things can be better. So I wanted to make sure that they could find out when the Board of Supervisors was meeting and what was on the agenda. And at that time, back in the day, we did not have the Board of Supervisors materials available online. So one of my first meetings, I asked the clerk of the board to work with us to make that happen. And it did. It happened just within a few months of my taking office. We did quite a few community forums in my first term, and we had a tricky budget year in there somewhere, and we held a community workshop on the budget. And I was convinced that the people at the workshop were going to come in and lobby for money to be allocated to certain departments or taken away from other departments. And that, in fact, is not at all what happened. What people made clear was they wanted us, the board and the county staff, to spend their taxpayer money wisely. They didn't have any particular axe to grind or specifics about how we should allocate the money. So I thought that was very interesting, and it made me realize the importance, which I already knew, but it gave me extra motivation to focus on accountability. I also was very interested in what I called the greening of the county. Really, we formed the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee. We worked on what became Monterey Bay Community Power, the whole community choice aggregation. We worked on the county's climate action plan, which was a whole plan designed to have the county's facilities and the county's carbon footprint be able to decrease over time. And we set that up. We're now working on the climate action plan for the broader community. And we created a position, the sustainability manager, that can shepherd all of our efforts in a coherent and cohesive direction. Another area that I felt strongly about, still do, is good land use planning. We passed the general plan in 2010, the year after I took office, and some of the tenets in there were to really concentrate growth and development in the areas where infrastructure and services already exist, so that we're allowing for perhaps greater jobs housing balance, more walkable communities, the ability for people to get to work or to go to the store or go to school by walking or biking or taking transit, but ideally by moving our bodies. And with good land use planning, that's the kind of community development that can happen. Those were some of my key areas when I began, and they have ended up being, evolving areas of interest all the way through. And then sometimes we need the community to speak up when there are things coming forward that might not be so good for the community. And an example of that was Whispering Oaks, which was a commercial development that the county was proposing out on Fort Ord. In the middle of an oak woodland, it would have necessitated cutting down tens of thousands of oak trees to put in, a bus yard and we didn't even quite know what else was going to go there. And it wasn't really connected to anything. It was just out in the middle of nowhere, which is, you know, piecemeal development. I mean, it's really not good planning. But the Board of Supervisors approved it on a 4-to-1 vote. I was the dissenter. And the community went to work to gather signatures for a referendum to ask the voters, do you want this project out there or not? And so many signatures were gathered so quickly that the Board of Supervisors decided to just rescind their vote and to unapprove the Whispering Oaks project. A couple of things that I really hope people will stay engaged with and continue to do is to stay involved with the decisions that the Board of Supervisors is making. I also really encourage women to run for office. It's one of the reasons that I have been so supportive of Wendy Root Askew running for my seat. I saw her work, and she had the ability from the beginning. And the time that she spent working with the community and with the county staff and on the issues just developed her realization that this was just absolutely fascinating and important work. And I really look forward to watching her grow in the job and do, I'm sure, lots of good on behalf of District 4 and the residents and the environment of Monterey County. So I really call on everyone to be involved, be creative, be caring, and continue to make our community a better place. And before I end, I just want to thank my staff. I have many accomplishments of which I am proud, some of which I've talked about. I never could have done even a fraction of the work that I have done if I didn't have such great staff. And probably every supervisor as they leave office says this because it's true. My office manager, Lori, for 11 and a half of my 12 years, my chief of staff, Christy Markey, my aide, Wendy Root Askew, they were extensions of my values and of the priorities that we all wanted to work on. They stayed in touch with the community. They followed through on things when I just went from meeting to meeting to meeting and was reading the next agenda packet. So staff really make the world go round, and I really want to thank them. And I also want to thank county staff. As I said earlier, so many people come to work for county government because it is public service, and our work, if we do it well, makes life better for the community. And if we don't do it well, we're just another pain in people's necks as they're trying to live their lives. And I know that, I mean, we have 5,000 staff at the county, and everybody works so hard and really is engaged in trying to make life better for the community. So it's really been a privilege to, you know, to work with all of you for these 12 years. And I encourage the staff, keep up the good work, the community, keep up the good work, and I look forward to cheering you on from the sidelines.
Bye, Jane. We love you.
It's mutual. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you
Thanks,
for your
Lou.
years of service.
My
Bye.
pleasure. Thanks for yours. Thanks for being here tonight, Lou. Fun
Oh,
talking
my
to you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye.